aerospace and defense manufacturing,
machines and automation,
additive manufacturing,
smart manufacturing,
the global manufacturing economy.
Welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Now, the podcast for manufacturing professionals, powered by SME. From the design screen to the shop floor to final assembly, we drive the conversation about making manufacturing smarter by connecting people who are passionate about manufacturing.
Hello, and welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Now, the podcast for manufacturing professionals. Don't forget to like and subscribe to get new episodes delivered to your feed each week. I'm your host, Steve Plumb, Editor-in-Chief for SME Media. I'm joined today by Craig Coyle from Operation Lead, a consulting firm he started a few years ago after serving as a pilot and company commander for the U.S. Army. After leaving the service, he then worked for the aerospace industry as a program manager for vertical takeoff and landing aircrafts before starting Operation Lead. Welcome to the show, Craig.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me.
So first of all, thank you for your service. Did you always want to be a pilot?
Oh, yeah. I think what I tell people is I kind of stumbled into leadership because of pursuing always wanting to be a pilot. I remember being a little kid and going on vacations with my family. And the most exciting part of vacation for me was when we would get on the airplane and fly to wherever we were going. And then when we would fly home. So I used to always get a hard time about that. But it was really cool to pursue that and ultimately see the opportunities that entering into that industry and that career has opened up for me.
So how old were you when you joined the Army, and how long were you in service?
Yeah, so I entered West Point straight out of high school. It's kind of funny. I graduated high school on a Thursday, and I was in basic training the following Sunday. And that's really all I knew for that's how I grew up as an adult, pursuing this dream of being an Apache pilot, and then, got to achieve it at a really young age. And I like to tell people I kind of had my midlife crisis way earlier than most people, because I achieved my dreams by the time I was 23 years old. And it forced me to be confronted with reality, especially being in a leadership position as well. And it's ultimately led me to the purpose and passion that put us here in this conversation today.
So going to West Point, imagine you went through a lot of leadership type training. What was that like, and how has that helped positioned you to succeed and kind of pursue your next path in your career?
Yeah, that's a great question, because, the academies are really seen as one of the foremost, preeminent leadership development institutions really in the world today. And yet myself and so many of my peers often face so many of the same challenges and struggles that new leaders, emerging leaders, even our frontline supervisors in the manufacturing world face every single day when they enter into this new world of leadership. And it was an absolute incredible experience for me. I mean, I learned so much. I got exposed to some absolutely incredible people. And I think that kind of nurtured an ecosystem for me to kind of learn the lessons as a leader I needed to really quickly when I entered into those roles. But the unique thing is it's really just like any other college. And really what we're going through in our society up until we inevitably end up in a leadership position is we're working through roles and environments that really promote excellence at the individual level. So even though you're learning all this stuff about leadership, it's applied and evaluated at an individual level. Just like when we're going through our engineering degrees or when we're working as a technician on the factory floor, it's all about how well can you perform at an individual level. The challenge is once you end up in a leadership role, everything flips. It's the principles and the mindsets that you apply as an individual that make you successful are going to be the very things that burn you out and make you miserable as a leader. And so I'm grateful to have had that experience at such a young age, and to help, all these organizations that I've been fortunate to work with lead their teams in overcoming those challenges as well.
I think at one point you had shared that, I forget the exact percentage, but was it 70% or so of new managers fail or quit?
Yeah, I think it covers around 60 or so percent. And it really, if you look at the population, there's kind of three statistics I like to cite quite often. I think about 50 to 60% fail within the first 18 months. Additionally, about 60 to 65% of new leaders and managers feel they don't have the skills to be successful in the role. And then another 50 to 60% end up leaving the role within 18 months. So when you think about those three statistics and how they all kind of overlap each other, I mean, you're probably hitting every single person that's in a leadership role for the first time. And they're all facing these challenges that, quite honestly, often hit them like a brick in the face.
So what is it that causes the failure? Is it just the lack of preparation up front?
Yeah. I think, a big part of it is what I shared earlier, is just not being aware of the fact that success in leadership is very often the antithesis of what success looks like as an individual. And we see that so often in the manufacturing world because it's, largely made up of people that are very successful individuals, whether that's from a hands-on labor technician perspective or from the engineering world, where to get an engineering degree, to become a professional engineer, it takes a lot of excellence at the individual level. And then I think that the caveat to that as well is I think, we often don't treat leadership the same way that we look at professional industries across the world. I obviously lean on my experience as a pilot quite a bit, but you would never trust a pilot that didn't have those shiny wings on their chest, right? You want to know that someone has been through the rigorous process of being vetted and trained to take you from point A to point B as a pilot. Well, it's the same as leadership, right? Just like it's the same with medical professionals, same with legal professionals. Well, why don't we treat and give leadership that same reverence and respect? We often don't see it. And when we do see it, it's really typically only at the very senior executive levels. But our frontline leaders and managers are often the people leading about 70 to 80% of our organizations. And so when we don't approach that level of leadership with the same reverence and authority, we're really sacrificing the culture and ultimately the engagement of most of our organization.
So leadership does require some sort of formal training and process to prep the people for it. I think you had mentioned some sort of a three-part development system. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, when I was going through my career in the military, it was a really unique career because it was kind of two careers, morphed into one. On one side, I was pursuing this path of becoming a pilot, and then, progressing as a pilot to become a senior pilot in the organization. But at the same time, I was holding these leadership positions and promoting through leadership positions at the same time. And what I noticed was, as a pilot, I had all these beautifully articulated standards to get me from one step to the next. I had instructor pilots alongside me every single step of the way, teaching me how to become better and grow as a pilot. And I had peers to the left and right of me that were all going through the same process together. But as a leader, I really didn't have any of that. Yeah, I had some peers, but I didn't really have much of a structure to follow. I didn't really know what it took to be successful as not just a manager, but as a leader, and empowering my team to be successful. And so I just kind of started thinking, well, what would that look like if we applied those concepts that make the aviation industry so successful and applied them to leadership? And there was really three components, and you could plug and play them however makes sense for your organization. But there's three components that really made a huge difference in my life as a pilot. The first was the idea of flight school, which is that kind of initial training. The second was the idea of a pre-flight. And this is huge in manufacturing because obviously in aerospace, we make these aircraft, but the concept of a pre-flight saves people's lives every day. And the underlying principle of a pre-flight is, what can you do that's within your control to give yourself the greatest chance of success each and every flight you take? We use checklists like crazy for that, and we apply that in the manufacturing world all the time. But how could you apply that concept to empower leaders to routinely lead effectively? What are the things that they can do that can help them control their success? And then the last concept is this idea of a progression, which is really what the whole pilot industry is built upon, is how can you create an environment that people show up to the table ready to learn, and they continue to grow and develop themselves over the course of their entire career. When you do that, you actually create an environment that craves growth, that treats flight or leadership like a true profession. And when you treat something like a true profession, well, guess what? You can expect professional results. So really the three components are flight school or an initial training, this idea of a pre-flight, and then the concept of creating this environment or ecosystem of progression.
So is the progression for the leader themselves or for the leader to create that progression among their team?
It's actually both. In the military, they have this process within aviation that everybody exists within. So as a new pilot, when you just graduate flight school, you're on one end of the spectrum, all the way up through the most senior pilots. And really what takes place is, as long as you're one step ahead of somebody else, you ultimately have the authority to help people behind you get to that next step. You know what it looked like as a pilot? You earn your wings, then your next step is to become what's called a readiness level 1 pilot. Once you're readiness level 1, your next step is to become what's called a pilot in command. And most of the people that are getting trained as readiness level 1 pilots are being trained by pilots in command. And most of these pilots in command are being trained by senior instructor pilots, but those instructor pilots are also being trained by more senior instructor pilots. And so it's creating this ecosystem from the very frontline leader all the way up through the senior leaders in our organization, where everybody is kind of working together, growing together with some structure that helps people get from A to B, with ultimately the whole goal of really inverting what our organization looks like. So we're not so focused about what we have to do to serve the people above us, but ultimately we're focused on what can we do to serve the people on the very front lines, because when we do that, then we create an organization that thrives.
So you didn't mention it by name, but part of it sounds like mentors and mentorship. Is that part of the overall leadership process?
Yeah. So within this concept of progression, I really see it as three components. One being structure. So what are the kind of key skills, the key in aviation, the key maneuvers you have to learn to go from one step to the next? And, for every organization and every level of leadership, that might look differently, but having some semblance of structure is always critical. The second component is guidance, which, as a pilot, it's your instructor pilot. And as a leader, it's a mentor. It could be a coach. It works best when it's not someone you directly report to, because there can be some, conflict of interest there. And then the final piece, and I think this is where most organizations actually miss it, is this concept of community. I always talk about leadership, and growing as a leader is ultimately a type of change, and change is hard. We often like to live in our homeostasis. And so when we try to create change in our lives, a lot of times our minds and our bodies like to resist it. It's why, if someone that wants to try and quit drinking, Alcohol Anonymous is such an important thing. So they get around people that are pursuing that same growth and that same change. So if we can create an environment where multiple people are trying to go from step A to step B as a leader together, we're actually going to create an environment where they inspire each other, they hold each other accountable. And that's when we really see this ecosystem of leadership really start to make huge headway in organizations.
So creating that environment or culture within an organization, I imagine is a pretty important part. The military or some other large organizations aren't necessarily known for being able to change quickly and adapt. What are some of the best practices that you've seen and can recommend, not only the endpoint, but the transitional points?
Yeah, I think, the number one thing when it comes to change that I think a lot of people miss is the psychological aspect and component of it. A lot of times we see the impact that change could have, and it's really difficult to overcome the initial friction to get moving in that direction of change. And so sometimes the best thing you can do is specific to a leadership environment, is find the smallest, easiest, quickest win you can make. A lot of times I was actually reading a book recently, and it was a guy who was running a fitness program. And what he talked about for a weight loss program, we talked about creating a program that for the first 2 weeks wasn't really sustainable, but created pretty dramatic results in the first couple weeks. So people could lose 10 pounds in 2 weeks. Now, that's not sustainable, and it tapers off into something much more sustainable, weeks 3 through 10. But the fact that they saw 10 pounds come off the scale in the first 2 weeks gave them the motivation and inspiration to commit to that weight loss journey so that they could see maybe 20 pounds at the end of 10 weeks. And I think we need to approach, creating this environment and culture of leadership as a profession the same way. And I think the easiest way to do that is this idea of a pre-flight. A lot of times it can be just looking at your leader statements of work, clearly isolating what's a management expectation versus what's a leadership expectation, and just give these frontline leaders, 1, 2, 3, no more than 5 things to do every single week that's focused on leading and communicating and providing purpose and clarity to their teams every single week. And that's something small. It's scalable across an entire organization, and it can do incredible, incredible things if it's really committed to.
Can you give any examples that come to mind?
Examples specifically of like one little thing you could do routinely?
Yeah, the kind of the pre-check list for leaders in a business.
Yeah. So people can check it. We created a leaders pre-flight checklist. They can download that at operationlead.com. The 5 different components I talk about that, and it boils down to 12 steps, are mission details, crew responsibilities, aircraft checks, emergency actions, and fighter management. I would say the easiest one to start with is mission details. It's something that the corporate world has taken from the military quite effectively, but I think the one thing that they've missed is the idea of a nested mission statement. Most organizations nowadays have a mission statement, but what they don't have is mission statements at every level, all the way down to the lowest team, that are tied to the economic objectives of what this organization wants to accomplish and is setting out to accomplish. And if team X that has 5 people has a mission statement with clear objectives that are actionable and tied to a purpose, that team is going to go out, get after it, and get it done every week. And if we could do that routinely, we're really setting ourselves up for success.
So as a consultant and speaker out in the industry, what are some of the common questions, concerns that you get?
Yeah, I think the biggest pushback whenever you talk to organizations about leadership is, look, I don't have the time. I don't have the resources. We just need to focus on getting our product out the door and meeting our deadlines and hitting our numbers every month. And I don't disagree, but the challenge is, when is that cycle of survival going to stop? And what good is that cycle of survival doing for you? The challenge is, we are in an environment where manufacturing jobs, the roles might be changing with advancements in technology, but the amount of jobs are increasing and the amount of people seeking those jobs are decreasing. We have to change how we're approaching this game. And if we continue to approach it like a numbers game, we're going to lose. And you create a competitive advantage for yourself and for your organization. And ultimately, you tap into the joy of leadership when you focus on creating these investments that create a culture of engaged employees that want to work for you and that want to show up to work every day. When you do that, and that happens through leadership, when you do it, your life's going to be better as a senior leader. Everybody that works for you's lives is going to be better. And you tap into what I like to call the joy of leadership, which is one of the most unique things you can experience in your professional career.
So are there certain some inherent qualities that you see in good leaders? And I guess, the follow-up to that would be, how much are in the person already and how much can be learned behaviors?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It kind of goes back to the age-old, question about leadership. Are leaders born or are they made? I'm a firm believer that leaders are made. I think you can change as a person, you can grow as a person, and you can learn anything as a person, because I kind of saw that in my life. And, if I would say the number one thing to teach someone that wants to be a leader is the mindsets and the principles that make you effective as a leader. I always like to say the first thing I'll teach someone is leadership starts with the golden rule, period, right? You treat people how you want to be treated. And then some of these mindsets and principles will build on that, having a growth mindset, understanding the power of collective habits and how that works or differentiates from personal habits. But those are the number one things. I think if someone truly believes in the power of the golden rule, then anything else as a leader is possible for them.
You had mentioned something earlier about, leaders are generally the ones that have risen in the ranks because they'd succeeded on in some way and had some expertise, but that doesn't necessarily make them a good leader, which can create a cycle where if you're leading a team and you're already the expert, that you can fall back on, I'll just do it myself because I know I can get it done, instead of developing the skills of other people.
Yeah, that was exactly the place I ended up in my life. I was the guy, hated group projects. If I had a group project in my aerospace engineering program, I mostly just did it all by myself. And that'll get you somewhere, and you'll succeed as an individual, and you'll probably succeed as an initial leader. But you'll probably reach a point in your life where you're burnt out and you're struggling and you're wondering, man, is this how it's going to look for the rest of my life if I want to continue to progress? So I would really encourage people that have that mindset is to really look and engage the people around you for the strengths and for the weaknesses that they have. We all have different strengths. We all have different weaknesses. And when you can create an environment where each person is leveraging their strengths and each other person is leveraging their strengths, usually most of those weaknesses get covered up, and you create a pretty unique collective dynamic that, really taps into that joy of leadership and the quote unquote synergy that happens when a team dynamic is really healthy.
So what's next for you? What do you want to do as you continue to grow Operation Lead?
Yeah, well, we're excited. We're launching a new program here in January to really help as many organizations as we can. We're going to start with about 12 slots for that program, and we're excited to offer at least 3 of those spots to people and listeners of the show today. So they can reach out to me directly, Craig, at Operation Lead, with Advanced Manufacturing Now podcast in the title, and we'll hop on a call about that. But no, we're excited. We're capturing all this into a book we're hoping to publish here in the next year or so, and just continuing to partner with great organizations like SME and opportunities to get this message out and serve as many people as we can. Because at the end of the day, we know if we empower good leaders, we create organizations that are filled with people that are enjoying their lives, that have better quality of lives, and ultimately they get to impact their families, and everybody is better for it. So we really believe in the power of leadership.
Well, thanks a lot for your time. And I have to ask, though, being the passion that you stated earlier about flying, do you still get a chance to get up?
Not right now, not too yet. Pretty focused and kind of in the weeds of building the business right now, but look forward to, down the road getting back into the air. I will say, when I was working in the eVTOL space, I did get to go into one of the organization's simulators and teach some of those engineers how to fly like an Apache pilot, which opened some eyes. So.
But that was a little bit different experience for them that they appreciate.
That's right. Yeah. No factor of safety for us.
Well, thanks again, Craig. I look forward to talking to you again in the future. And can you repeat the website information and where listeners can go for more information?
Absolutely, yeah. Feel free to visit us at operationlead.com. That's where you can download the leader's pre-flight checklist, or feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn at Craig Coyle.
And to learn more about the latest manufacturing trends and hear more of our podcast, visit advancedmanufacturing.org and be sure to like and subscribe to our feed.